All right, let's get started, folks. Okay, folks, I mean, you're in for a real treat tonight. I don't know that NICA has ever had this much knowledge here based on the tax appeal, the taxing, and the appeal process. So we've assembled a lot of people here, and they have a tremendous amount of knowledge. Whether you own just a house or you own 30 pieces of property, commercial or whatever, you're in for a real treat tonight. Because you're gonna, by the time you're done here, you're going to understand the taxing process and the appeal process, all the way through, including commercial. So I know there's quite a few of you here that have commercial buildings, mobile home parks, and different things like that. So, anyways, what we have, who we have here is we have Daniel Tim. And he's with he's the chief deputy with Porter County, and then Kathleen Honnold. Okay, and she is in charge of tax appeals. Is that correct?
Yeah, appeals and commercial.
Appeals and commercial. Okay. And then we have appraiser Joe. Joe Wazalik. I always mess it up there.
Don't worry, everybody does.
Joe wears a couple of hats here. Joe's an appraiser. And on the Lake County side, he does tax appeal appraisals. And on the Porter County side, he doesn't do the tax appeal appraisals because he is president of PETA. So he will actually hear the tax appeal and is the president of the committee there. So, and then we also have Robert Comerford here, and he is a commercial certified tax appeals specialist, correct?
That'll work. That's
okay. So basically, anything over, so to speak, 4 units.
Yeah, we handle commercial, industrial properties, mobile home parks. If you have strip malls or multi-unit buildings, that's the kind of thing I handle. I don't really get into smaller single-family homes, that kind of thing. I have the skill to do it, but it just in my business it doesn't pay the bills. So if there are people here that have commercial property, investment property of that nature, that's what I'm here, and I can answer those kind of questions for you.
Okay, and then what we're going to do is, I think Joe is going to have a PowerPoint presentation, and then we'll open it up to questions. We'll go to the residential side. Maybe Bob will do some explaining on the commercial side, and then basically we'll go into a panel of questions for the evening. Okay, now what we're not going to do tonight is, the last time we had people from Lake County here, I thought I was going to have to cut them down by the end of the rope, because I mean, they were going to string this guy up. We will not have that. So I understand this is a very, very hostile subject and everything, but these folks are here to educate you, to make sure you got it right. So they're gonna educate you, make sure the process is, you understand the whole process. So again, about 4 or 5 years ago over in St. John Township, I invited the Lake County, and it was pretty hostile. So we will not let that happen tonight. So again, these folks are here off the clock and on their own time to educate us, and I applaud them for it. So,
is that why you call Porter County?
Well, yeah, because I would probably be in that lynch mob too. with Lake County.
Yeah.
So anyways, with that, I'm going to turn it over to Joe. What I would like to do, though, is have you folks kind of introduce yourself a little bit and sort of speak, tell us a little bit about yourself while you're doing that also.
Okay.
All right then?
All right.
Okay.
As Dale said, I'm Joe Wazalik. Can you guys hear me in the back all right? Can you see this okay in the back? Because tonight I'm going to give you the inside scoop of the appeal process, how assessments are done. We have our fine team of experts over here, Daniel Tim and Kat Honnold. I work closely with Kat. She's the one that does all our scheduling in Porter County for our PETA board. The attitude we have in Porter County is that we need to get it right so people don't have to come back. The goal is to eliminate the need for PETA. That's our goal. Now, there will always be PETA there, because there will always be someone who is not going to agree that their assessment on their property is actually accurate. Because the goal is to have, can you follow me all right? All right, I'm going to dance around here so you got to come in front. The goal is to make sure that the assessments on properties, both residential, all three actually, residential, commercial, industrial, are statistically accurate. Now, statistically accurate doesn't mean exact. From an assessment standpoint, statistically accurate generally means within 10% of what a property may actually sell for. It's no different than an appraisal, it's an opinion. As John Crum, my fellow appraiser friend, he has opinions like I do. We're both residential appraisers, that's our specialty, and we've been doing it a long time, he longer than I. I've been doing it 22 years, and he's been doing it a little longer than that, although I have grayer hair. But what we try to do is most of the time, PETA BOA and people in the position that Rob is in, they're generally adversaries. Because Rob is a tax rep who will usually sit on one side of the table, and then I, with my two other board members, we sit on the opposite side, and it's like, as I'm sure some people have experienced in some counties, it's a nasty experience. Well, what we try to do in Porter County is to take that experience and say, look, we live in Porter County as well. The goal is to try to get it right. Let's take a look at what the record card says to make sure it's accurate, because that's the basis. And we'll go through this in a little bit. That's the basis for appeals, is first of all looking at your record card and see if your house or your income property is actually being described with accurately. Because there are times when you might have a house that's being overassessed, only to find that the assessor thinks you have a finished basement when you don't even have a basement at all. And so by changing the record card, it lowers the assessment from that point forward. And with that type of an appeal, an objective appeal, something that is actually wrong with the record card, you can actually go back 3 years and get corrections on your tax bills and get a refund for the 3 years before that. So the goal in Porter County is to resolve the appeals. One of the things, John Snyder, who was unfortunate was not able to be here, John's an appraiser as well. He has the same license I do, and we became good friends over the course of time just because of our business relationships. And I worked in his campaign, I worked to help him get elected. He was successful, and when we walked in on January 1st of 2011, there were over 7,500 appeals that were active that we had to face, and they went back all the way 2007? Yes. We went all the way back to 2007, so up to 4 years before. In the last year and 5 months, we have whittled away that 7,500, and now we're under 1,000. And that's been the result of people like Kat, who's one of the hearing officers at the informal level, working with the property owners to see just what's going on with their property. Everything has to be market-based. You can't just go in and say, I don't like my taxes. Well, I don't like my taxes either, but it is what it is. And so it's a matter of the assessor's job is to make sure that the assessment is correct, because that's the basis for calculating your tax bill. When you go in to the treasurer to pay your bill and you don't like that bill, you're about 2 years too late to do anything about it. Because it has to start with the local governments who create the budgets. It has to deal with the assessments that assess your property, and when you get the two together, that's when the bills come out. Now, when you go to pay it, you yell at the treasurer only collects the money. And they don't have anything to do with the assessments or with the government spending. So that's kind of a little bit of what we do in Porter County. The difference between Lincoln and Porter County with PETA BOA, the state law says you can have either a 3-member PETA BOA board or a 5-member PETA BOA board. We happen to chose a 3-member board. I'm one of the Porter County Commissioner appointments. There's 2, and we have 1 Porter County Council appointment. So we have 3 of us, and it takes 2 to agree on giving someone a break or not, or somewhere in between. We also hear property tax exemption requests, properties that people are asking, I don't want to pay taxes at all because I'm exempt. We hear those questions as well. And we have some that have not been successful. We have had some that have been successful, and it comes down to, if we're going to eliminate property taxes on this property, there has to be a public good, and state law says how to look at that. So that's kind of the attitude that we've taken. We don't look at it. We don't look at Rob as being an adversary, but we look at Rob as being a partner, because he brings market information to us that we may not have, and if we can get an assessment right and get a record card corrected, that's one more taxpayer that now has their assessment correct that we shouldn't have to see in the future, hopefully. And basically, we're trying to put Rob out of business because we won't need him in Porter County.
That's what they say.
That's the goal. Now, realistically, that's a different story, but it is what it is.
You're in Porter County, so.
Yeah, we're Porter County, so you can deal with Lake County all day long. But the one thing I forgot, just another aside, we just went through a total reassessment of the state of Indiana. It was due to be completed by March 1st of 2012, and in Porter County, we met the deadline by 2 days. Well, we met the deadline. We walked into a reassessment that was started, and we had to kind of take a back seat and look at what was done, and then we had to go move on from there. But it was 85,000 parcels, Kat, is that about right?
84.
About 84,000 parcels in Porter County. And it's a matter of starting at the end game and working backward to figure out what you got to do. PETA-BOA is also responsible, and most people don't realize how much power PETA-BOA has. PETA-BOA is also responsible for approving the land order that's done every 4 years. The land order is the order that is approved by 3 members that sets the basic land values for the entire county for the next 4 years. So we have base rates that everything is taken from. If you have a property that's, say, for instance, a lot size that's 80 by 120, and your lot is 85 by 120, we take the base and we add a little bit based on the rate to reflect what your bigger lot size would be valued at. We also, we don't do agricultural land because that's what's done by the state of Indiana. Farmland, for instance, is done by the state with the help of Purdue University, but we do everything else. And we were, the assessor starts that work, was required to have that done by July 1st of last year. John having been only the assessor for 5-6 months, it was almost impossible to get that done because it hadn't even been started. And so with the help of Policy Analytics, a statistical firm down in Indianapolis, we were able to get the residential land order done at the end of November, I believe, and the commercial industrial done it was due by March 1st, I think it was our last meeting in February. So we met that deadline. Right now, in Porter County, the ratio study, which is what the next year's changes in assessment are based on, that has now been sent to the state and approved a month ahead of time, or a month earlier than last year. And we're the 18th county out of 92 to get that done. So we're working toward getting bills out on time. This will be the 2nd or 3rd year, I keep referring to you guys because you got no more than that I do. 2nd or 3rd year that tax bills actually are going out on time in Porter County. So with a lot of that being said, I have a little PowerPoint here that'll help walk through some of these issues. Do we have anybody who works in the assessor's office anywhere? Come on, fess up, fess up.
We wouldn't let him in.
Other than John, any other appraisers here?
Yeah, I mean,
Dale.
Or Dale, of course. Has anybody had to go through the appeal process before? Okay, couple? Oh, John, I figured you would. So if there's something that may not necessarily, I'm going from the experience of Porter County. So if you guys want to explain some things that you might run into in Lake County, feel free to add to the discussion. But one of the things that I wanted to try to start with is some of the basic components of the tax bill. And what we have here, how the tax bill is calculated, you have the tax rate. Now if I'm going too rudimentary, please let me know. If you guys know all this stuff, I don't want to bore you. The tax rate is what your assessed value is calculated with to make the tax bill. It's the combined rates of all local governments. And in most local governments, if you look at a tax rate, now in Portage, my tax rate's $2.54. That money does not all go to Portage. Part of it goes to Portage, part of it goes to the county, part goes to the township, part goes to the library, part goes to library. Some cases, conservancy districts, could be just about anything. Most cases, it's anywhere from 5 to 7 taxing entities that make up the tax rate. The school system. The school system used to be about 62% of the tax rate. And when the law was changed in 2008, when we went to that 7% sales tax, they took off a big chunk of the school rate, but we still have this part of the school rate that pays for buses, school buildings, the capital items. The state pays for the administration, teachers' salaries, that kind of thing. And when the economy goes down because people aren't spending, that's why we hear all the hoopla going on right now, why teachers can't get raises even though they may have big chunks of money in the capital account. You can't use capital money for teacher salaries. So we have the tax rate. This is how the tax rate's calculated. You take the levy, and the word levy, if you ever hear it discussed, that's what the governments want to spend. That's what they're basically, they're levying the burden of government on the property owner. So it's the budget that has been, that part of the budget that balances the spending of government. Because government gets money from a number of sources, and if the government wants to spend $100, they look at, I can get it from excise tax, I can get it from fines, I can get it from fees, and I'm still 85 cents short. 85 cents then becomes the levy. That's what the government is going to say, I need to collect to balance our budget. And to come up with the tax rate, we take the assessed value. Now, it's not only your assessed value, but it's the assessed value of all of the property owners in that district. If it's in the town, it's all the property owners in the town. I believe Portage, or no, I believe the Porter County, the value of Porter County is like 1 point, or no, it's more than that. I'm trying to remember, when I used to live in Highland, the value of the town of Highland was like $1.1 billion. So when Highland would look at calculating the tax rate for your bill, they would say, I'm gonna levy on the property owners $100. Our assessed value is 1.1 billion. You divide one into the other and you get the tax rate. It's as simple as that. Now, the one thing that most people think is, look at all this economic development. Look at all this extra money the town and governments are going to get. How many people believe that? The more buildings you see, the more the money the government gets. Nobody believes. Okay? Well, unfortunately, that's not the case. Fortunately, what it does do, government, once they set their budget based on the value of the community or the county or the township, they are going to be allowed to spend that amount of money, period. Now, if there's growth in the community, as you see where it says AB, as the growth in the community goes up, and I'll show you this in a minute, the tax rate actually goes down. The government gets the same amount of money. The benefit is that everybody in that government, in that area, pays less tax individually. So when we look at growth in our AV, what that should signal to you is not more money going to the government, but a lower tax bill for you. That's the benefit to the homeowners. Gross assessed value is the gross value of all the properties in a given area. The net AV is the gross assessed value minus all the deductions. Homestead deductions, supplemental deductions, over 65, mortgage, and all that. And that's when we look at calculating the levy, or the tax rate. It's based on the net AV, not the gross. The net AV is after everybody's gotten all their deductions out. And so your gross tax bill is equal to the tax rate, kind of low, equal to the tax rate times the net assessed value divided by 100, because everything's done by 100. So it's basically your bill times your net assessed value. That's how your bill is calculated. Okay so far? Am I staying anybody's way? I didn't bore anybody. I don't hear anybody snoring yet. So that's good. All right. All right, so how can tax rates rise? That's the basic formula. Tax rate equals levy divided by the net assessed value. For tax rate to rise, if the assessed value stays the same, the levy has to go up. It's pretty straightforward. If the government wants to spend more money, the tax rate's going to go up, given everything the same. For the tax rate to rise, if the AD goes down, the levy, for the tax rate to go up and the levy stays the same, which is the amount of government, the assessed value goes down. This is one of the problems that the city of Gary and East Chicago and Hammond is having, because their cost of government really it has gone down, but it hasn't gone down in proportion to the loss in assessed value. The assessed value in those cities, the urban core, has actually gone down faster than the reduction in spending. And that's why the tax rate goes up, because there's not enough anywhere else to make up for it. Because there's only 3 components to the bill. And if the AV goes down, like say a community becomes lower and lower, and government wants to spend more money, then the tax rate goes really high. That's the worst case scenario. Okay? Now, how can the rate stay the same? Tax rate stays the same. The assessed value of the community stays the same. The levy stays the same. Everything's status quo from one year to the other. Nobody gets raises. Cost of gas doesn't go up. We're going to use the same amount of salt. Everything stays the same. For the tax rate to stay the same, if the value of the community goes down, the levy, the government spending, has to go down at the same rate, which is what hasn't happened in the urban core. What we've seen there is that the AV has actually gone down again faster than the reduction in spending. And for the tax rate to be the same, if the assessed value goes up, the levy goes up in proportion to it. So you have those 2 components working together to keep the tax rate the same. Because government's going to still spend the same amount of money, it's just the balance between spending and the, the tax rate to stay the same, the government spending and the value of the community needs to go up in proportion. Now, for how can tax rates fall? You have the assessed value in the community stays the same. The only thing else that can happen is that government cuts their spending. There's a cynic in the crowd, I hear it already. For tax rates to go down, if the levy stays the same, then the assessed value of the community has to go up. So in some cases, communities are saying, we're going to hold the line on spending. For instance, the Lake County budgets are frozen to the same level of 2008. The levies are frozen there, they cannot go up. Now, why does your tax bill go up then, if the levy stays the same? It's because the assessed value in that community is going down. If the levy stays the same and the value goes up, the only thing that can happen is the tax rate goes down. So in this case here, the tax rate goes down, the AV goes up, the levy stays the same. Now, if the levy goes down, government cuts their spending, and the AV goes up, we got economic development, we got new creation of either housing or commercial industrial properties, then the tax rate really goes down. Okay? Everybody with me on all this? So, just because there's new buildings going in a community doesn't mean the government gets more money. They don't get more money after the budget is set. The only thing that happens is that the tax rate adjusts for the difference in the value of the community. So who does what in the county? Most people don't realize who does what. They go and yell at the treasurer when they should be yelling at the assessor or vice versa. The assessor determines the value of all real and personal property for taxing purposes. It's the only thing the assessor does. They also deal with the exemptions. We approve exemptions whether they're due or not. The auditor maintains all records for calculating property tax bills. If you are going to file your homestead exemption, you go to the auditor's office. If you are dealing with a mortgage exemption, you're going to go to the auditor's office. If you, exemption filings, ownership, if you want to find out who owned your property before you go to the auditor's office. They have a record of all of the ownership from when your property became your property. So if you want to ever find out the history of your property, go to the auditor's office and they will give you a printout. And if you have an account with them, they'll even fax it to you. Nickel a page, I think it is. The treasurer, the only thing the treasurer does is, once the auditor determines the bill, because the auditor is actually the one that calculates the tax bill. It's not the treasurer. It's not the assessor. The auditor applies the tax rates, and they look at your assessed value, they generate the bill, and they give it to the treasurer to collect. And the treasurer, all they do is they just collect the money and they just give it back to the communities. So the treasurer is, if you go and complain to the treasurer, you're wasting your breath. If you go to the auditor, the only thing he's going to talk to you about is exemptions, ownership history, that kind of thing, and your homestead credits. That's one thing in the state law, the homestead, if you got the pink forms, everybody's got a homestead, got the pink forms, make sure you fill that in, because if you don't, it's going to be a big deal on your bill. And you can only get one homestead credit. Doesn't matter if it's in Florida or not, you get one. Okay, this is a fact sheet that's on the Department of Local Government Finance's website. Now, there's all, and it's kind of hard to see from here, but there's two types of appeals that you can make. One is a subjective appeal and one is an objective appeal. Now, I'm going to give you a website here that you can go and you can browse all day long. You'll find all these things on there, and it's just a wonderful website. You probably find things I've not even seen yet. It's www.in for Indiana, .gov for government, / so it's to the right, DLGF, and that stands for Department of Local Government Finance. And the DLGF has so many things on there. It is a very transparent website. You can look up all kinds of things. If we get some time, I've gotten connected to the internet and I can even show you some of that. But what we have here is two ways to appeal. One is a Form 130 appeal, which is the subjective appeal. When you do a subjective appeal, does everybody know about the 45-day appeal window? Okay? Again, with the two types of appeals, the Form 130 is a subjective appeal. That's the one that says, I don't like the value of my property because it's too high. Now, I've not had anybody come in yet and say it's too low, but it's too high. And the only time you can go in and get in line is within 45 days from one of a couple of different mailings that you will get. Now, in Porter County, the way that the system works is once the new assessments are generated for the new tax year, the assessor will send out what's called a Form 11. A Form 11 is a basic form that says, here's your old assessment, here's your new assessment. And you have a 45-day window from when, I think I even have a copy of one. Let me just see here real quick. This is a Form 11. This is my Form 11, actually, from a couple of years ago. And what this notice up on top says that you can appeal this value up to 45 days from the mailing date, which is on the bottom. And in this case was October 7, 2011. So the last day to file an appeal on that Form 11 was the end of November last year. Now we've had people who own property in Lake County and Porter County, and once they get their tax bill, which is another way of being able to get the window open, they come with their tax bill in Porter County and want to file an appeal. And this is, how late were some of those, Kat? April? Something like that when the bills came out?
Still getting them, what's going on?
All right, so the tax bills came out in April to be first installment in May. So they come in and ask for Kat and say, I want to file an appeal. And I say, well, you know, you're 4 months too late, 5 months too late, because you didn't pay attention to the Form 11, which is one of those notices. Now in Lake County, the tax bills have been so late that the assessor has not used the Form 11. What the other part of the law says that if there's no Form 11, the tax bill becomes your notice. And when the tax bills are mailed, that's when your 45-day window is open. And it just so happens to be, when does the tax window close?
July 9th this year.
July 9th in Lake County. Right now, you can file an appeal, a subjective appeal, the form, I'll go back, the Form 130 appeal, the one that's up on this fact sheet, if you go to that website, you'll find that a subjective appeal. If you don't like your assessment, you can go to the assessor's office and say, I want to file an appeal. You don't have to have your evidence. All you have to do is you have to go in there, and I think Lake County has a form. That's what they do. You could put it on a napkin if you wanted to. You just have to have, there's no form that's required, although there is a Form 130 that the state says you could use, but it's not a required form. But the Lake County assessor has a basic form that they have at the counter. It says, you know, you got to have the basic information: who the owner is, the property number,
The owner name, parcel number, address, telephone, contact.
right, contact
Yep,
information.
and a request for informal appeal, and you're good to go.
Right.
And you laugh when he says you can put it on a napkin, but by law you could do that and turn
Right.
it, and you'd be all right.
Yeah, because there's
Now-
no, although I think in Lake County, don't they say, well, if you don't put it on their form, they're not going to hear it? I heard that
That
rumor
doesn't
too.
work, yeah, they can say
Yeah.
that, but also, if you happen to have a local assessor, which there are still some townships in Lake County,
Right.
St. John, Center and Crown Point, you have Hobart still is in existence, you're better off going to that local township assessor and
You can stand up
filing.
over here, huh?
That's okay, that's okay.
There's people in the back.
It's okay. You can go to your local assessor and file with them. It's probably a better idea to do that because you create more of a personal situation, a relationship with them. contrary to popular belief, the assessor, particularly the local ones, they want to work with you. If you have a problem with the residence, even if it's income property, they're going to quickly get you through the process of determining if it's right or wrong. They'll be able to explain to you if it's right and why, and if it's wrong, they're going to want to help you do that. They don't want you to be upset. You vote. And they have they have a lot of data. They might not be privy to some information that you are. Maybe you just closed on a property, you spent 50 on it, they've got it assessed for 75. They might not have the closing statement yet, so you can present that to them. Maybe you have an appraisal on a property that they haven't been privy to see. But their goal is to make sure that you're assessed fairly. So, you know, when I hear about people almost getting lynched, it bothers me a little bit. I get into a lot of arguments with county assessor staff, but it's not that we don't like each other, it's that we're on opposite sides of the table and we both feel that we're right. And usually at the end of the day, one of us realizes the other one is wrong. So.
Rod does bring up a valid point. In Porter County, we have 12 townships. And I think it was in 2010, might have been 10, might have been 8, I don't remember now. There was a referendum on the ballot. Do you want to keep your township assessor, basically? And in Porter County, the only one left out of 12 townships is the one in Portage. So we have the county assessor is in charge of assessing the entire county except for Portage Township, which is primarily Portage, Ogden Dunes, South Haven, and a little bit down to about 700 north. In Lake County, it's a different story. There was only one township assessor that was taken out by vote. The others were too small. They were taken out automatically. All the ones at the lower end of the county, Eagle Creek, West Creek, Cedar Creek, Hanover was taken out, some of the smaller ones. But the ones that are remaining, I think there's still 7 of them that are still remaining, if I'm not mistaken. You still have Calumet Township, that's the biggest one. You've got Center Township, Crown Point, St. John Township, Ross Township, Hobart Township. So, is there another one?
No, I think it's
No, North is gone. North is gone. Yeah, North is the county. So East Chicago, Hammond, Whiting, Highland, Munster, there is no township assessor, it's the county. John Matanovich was taken out. He was the assessor at the time. So the other townships, though, that's where Rob was talking.
Does anybody have property in North Township? Have any of you in North Township filed an appeal several years ago? It still hasn't been heard?
It's been over a year.
Okay, and that's one thing that'll get people really irate with the assessor. I want you to know the new assessor, Hank Adams, is doing a really good job of trying to get through those. But what you have to realize is that when you guys voted and got rid of Matanovich and took away all that staff in that office, all the duties and responsibilities for assessing and hearing appeals went to the county assessor. So that office has had to absorb all that work, and that's why they're behind. I know they're getting caught up. Personally, I have pages and pages of appeals there. But when people get upset about that, you also have to see the other side of the fence. They had 7,000 appeals in Porter County, and they've worked through them. But I can tell you the number is significantly higher just in North Township and Lake County. So that's all.
Yeah, I think in Lake County, Porter County has about 85,000 parcels. Lake County, I think, has 165 or 150,000. It's somewhere in that neighborhood. I know it's almost double. And so when you have a staff of people and you have appeals that go back to the Collier-Trumbull days of 2002, that was such a disaster. It just was a real mess. I got caught up in that, and it took me 3 years to work through that appeal. But right now in Lake County, you just received the tax bills about 4 weeks ago or so, or less, and the window to appeal is now open. And as Rob was saying, that if you're in all these townships that we didn't name, North is one that you have to go to the county, along with all the ones in the southern part. You start with your township assessor, and the township assessor is where you do your informal hearing. Because you always have an opportunity to resolve your assessment appeal with the local assessor if you have one. If not, then you deal with the county. And you always have the right to an informal hearing. The law says the informal hearing process is so it helps eliminate the backlog at Peterborough. The law basically says that everybody has a right to go to Peterborough. But if you're able to resolve it at the informal hearing level, Peterborough no longer has to even get involved in those. It just gets approved, gets changed, and everybody's everybody's moving on with their lives. So right now we're dealing with the 130 appeal. That's the valuation appeal. And July the 9th is the deadline. After July 9th, you lose your rights forever and ever, amen, and you have to wait till the next year comes around. Now the next year, I was telling you that the state of Indiana went through a total reassessment, so next year we're starting with whole new numbers. And the assessors are now using the new numbers and comparing them with sales, and we'll see how that shakes out in the counties. So far it looks like in Porter County, everything's working out pretty well. So we have the 130 appeal, there's a 133 appeal. The 133 appeal is the one that has no window of loss. The only thing that if you wait, the time that you can go back 3 years just moves up a year. But you still can go back 3 years. And that's for things like illegal taxes, things that you have with your house, or the assessor says you have that you don't have. Now the one thing that I will tell you, and we ran into this. We had a meeting on Monday, our PETA meeting, and we had a petitioner come in front of us his tax bill went up, or his assessment went up and it reflected in his tax bill. And we couldn't get a hold of him to get through the informal hearing process. We finally got a hold of him come in front of PETA. And we had an opportunity to sit down with him, go over his record card, and we found errors in his record card. We found that he had a finished room upstairs that he could only access by ladder, and that wasn't finished. So after we took off that finished area and added on the deck that he didn't have, and what else did we add on? There was a couple of things that we added on. His assessment went up. So be wary of, and this form here, it says it somewhere that, when you appeal, the risk is the fact that your assessment could go up if errors in the record card are found. Because I think he had a new pole barn that he built, so he had an old one on the record card. When we changed it to reflect the new pole barn, the value of the pole barn went up, and by the time he took things off, added things on, his assessment went up by about $8,000 or $9,000. On I think it went from like 150 something to 163. So he was satisfied now that his record card was correct, but he said he wished that he hadn't come to begin with. But it is what it is. So there's not always a guarantee it's going to go down. We had one time, also just a little war story here, where we found we were dealing with valuing a landfill in Porter County. And the argument made by the owner of the landfill was that their property should be assessed like everybody else's property around. And what we found was everybody else was wrong and theirs was right. So now we're reassessing the whole area. Those things happen. So be wary of your neighbors going for appeals, because things like that can happen, especially in the agricultural areas. You get the agricultural rate if you're actively farming. If you're not actively farming and you got a house on your property, chances are it's going to be valued as a residential rate and not at the agricultural rate, which could be 5 times higher on the land value. So there's a business owner in Portage who has a large parcel who is farming soybeans on it so he can get the agricultural rate until that point in time that he can utilize it for his business. So, those things are there. Another little tidbit, if you have a property with an attic and it's got a floor on it, as long as you don't put a set of stairs up to it, you won't get assessed. As soon as you put those stairs up there, now you get assessed as an attic. I learned that because I had a house like that, and once I put the stairs up, I started getting assessed for it. So that's a little inside story that you can share with your friends over a drink sometime. The Form 133 is the subjective, or is the objective appeal, that is the ones that I do have or I don't have. And that can go back 3 years. And if you get a refund, you will get your refund plus interest.
Joe, if I could add to that.
Yes.
I'm not going to stand up, just, it says it can go back 3 years, and in theory that's correct, but what the code is it can go back 6 installments. So if you're halfway through a year and there's a correction, if you've paid May and not November, you can go back May, you can go back November and May, and November. So it could be 4 calendar years, so to speak.
So did everybody hear that? It's basically it goes back 6 installments. So if you're in the middle of a year and you go in front of the assessor and you find that, hey, you've got a 50 by 20 foot deck on the back, I don't have a deck. and they come out and they say, yeah, you're right, you don't have a deck, we'll take it off. They'll go back 6 installments. So as Rob was just saying, it could go back. It's still the equivalent of 3 years, but it can overlap into 4 potentially. Depends on the timing. Again, the Form 11. We talked about the Form 11. Anybody in Porter County, watch for this in September because that'll be a window of opportunity. In Lake County, the window of opportunity is right now open. So you can see how far back Lake County is compared to Porter. We're getting ready in, this is what, June, July, August. In 3 months, we're going to start getting ready for next year's billing. In Lake County, they just got out the bills for this past year. So we're about 8 or 9 months ahead there. But again, Lake County is a big place and there's a lot of problems that are trying to be cleaned up. This is our new website over in Porter County. And the address is www.portercountyassessor.com. John Snyder, his beautiful face there. He's our Porter County Assessor who has worked very diligently on getting things reorganized, getting things together with Daniel's help and Kat's help. This is where, in Porter County, you would start with researching your record card. Now, I don't have a slide for Lake County, but Porter County, everything on our website, you can get to anything you want without a charge. Lake County, it's a little different. Lake County, you can get on the assessor's website and get limited information. If you want to pay a monthly rate, what is it, Rob, 20 bucks, 25 bucks to get on the full Lake County assessor?
Let me think. It's a recurring bill. I think it's $23.95. It's right in
Something
there.
like that. It's almost $25. And you can get sales history, you can get the pictures if they have them, sketches. You can get a lot more than being a guest. The guest gets you limited information, but any of these records now are public. If you want to check and see what your next door neighbor's house is assessed for, you can go on there. Just type in their name or address, or if you know their parcel number. On our website, it's kind of hard to see, but we have a property information link that if you click on there, it will take you to this screen. And on this screen, you could search by individual property, either by parcel number, which is that big long number if you know it, by tax ID number, which now actually should be the same, the owner's name or the property address. All you got to do is just fill one of these in, and you don't have to fill the whole thing in, because the less you put in there, the greater chance you'll find what you're looking for. You might find multiple properties and you could pick from it. And then you hit the submit button down on the bottom. This will bring you up to this screen. This is the search results screen, and I already did one. This is my property. And from here, you can check to see if that's really what you're looking for. Hit the select button, and in Porter County, you'll get to this screen, multiple screens, but it gives you a little basic information. And if you click on that upper level button there where it says Property Record Card PDF, you will actually get a copy of the record card. This is what you need to review when you are looking at your property. It's the property record card. In Lake County, they don't have these online. Porter County has them online all day long. And on this record card, there's 2 sides to it. This record card has everything on there that is describing your property and how the assessment was developed. Up on the top, it has the ownership and legal description. So if you want to appeal, you need to put on an appeal form who the owner is and what the legal description is. And the property number, I don't know if anybody can see this kind of far, but the property number is this number up over here. Porter County starts with 64, Lake County starts with 45, and the reason those numbers are like that is because they took all the 92 counties in the state, lined them up alphabetically, and gave them the numbers starting from, I think, 1 to 99. So Porter County is number 64, and Lake County is 45. Location information. This side over here tells you what township you're in, what county you're in, what taxing district you're in. I happen to be in Portage City, Portage Township, and it has the neighborhood name. The neighborhood name is critical if you're going to try to use the assessor's website to research properties in your neighborhood for your appeal. Because what you want to try to do is stay within the neighborhood that the assessor used to determine your assessment, because those are going to be the most comparable properties that are out there. In this case, mine is called Portage Township Venus Sub. Some of them are by number, but they all have a subdivision. Down on the bottom has the site size. My house actually has 1.5 acres, I guess it is. And so the first acre is assessed as the highest valued property. That's the way the assessments work. If the first acre is what supports the improvements. So the first acre has the highest value. The second, any subsequent acres are valued less. Now, my other half an acre or so actually is wetlands, wooded wetlands, so I can't really do much with it other than look at it. So there's I don't even walk back there. But it's wooded wetlands, and so there is a negative influence because of the restrictions that wetlands have on it. It's actually designated that way. So it shows what your land size is. Now, if you have an irregular lot, that number may not necessarily be what your survey says, because what the assessment process tries to determine a front and a side. And by using some calculations to square it up, sometimes there might be one calculation, sometimes there might be two, in order to describe the lot size that you have. Then what this next section here is, it shows the history of the assessed values, and the one that's up there now is 2011, which was my current assessed value for that year. Then it's got the assessed value history. This is the back side of the card. Now on the back side, you see a sketch of the floor plan. It shows how big the house is. One of the things you need to do is make sure your house is the right size as the assessor believes, because sometimes the houses are bigger. I know, John, if you've run into that before,
Oh, yeah.
you look at a record card and you go out there and you start measuring the house, and it's like, wait a minute, the record card says 42, I'm getting 38. And you go back and you measure the other way, I'm still getting 38. And you find that the house is actually smaller because when it was built, it was modified from the blueprints, and what the assessor thought was being built actually wasn't what was built. Sometimes they're bigger, and as John and I, as appraisers, and Dale, our job, even though I'm on PETA, we have a confidentiality clause in our standards of practice that say we can only share information with our client. And if I find something out in the field that is different than what the record card says in Porter County, well, it's up to the assessor to find it out, because I have my appraiser's hat on today and not the assessor's hat. And so this is where you start, is on looking at the size of your building. Look at whether you have a garage or not, whether you have decks, whether you have covered porches, air conditioning, fireplaces, sheds. Let's see what else is on there. If you have more than one garage, the issues then become with the tax caps, because the tax caps complicate things a little bit. Usually what's covered by the homestead 1% cap is a garage, your first garage, anything attached to your house. After you get past that, the other items are then at what's considered to be the 2% cap level and not covered by the homestead deduction. So there, in some cases, as you go back in the front, I don't think I have anything under 2% cap. But yeah, as a matter of fact, I do. On here, I have total residential 1% cap, and then there's $300, I don't know what that's for, that is non-residential. And that's at the 2% cap. So the building sketch, the finishing info. This says I have a masonry stoop, a covered front porch, a wood deck, and I have a Whirlpool tub. And yes, Whirlpool tubs get assessed because they had the jetted tub. The way that the assessment is done, the beginning part of it is by looking at the physical characteristics of your property. And this is what the assessor does. They look at all the physical characteristics. They look at the garages and sheds and decks and all that goes into this side of the card. And each item is given a value based on the cost manual. And with this reassessment, the cost manual was based in 1999 and everything was trended from 1999. Now with this new reassessment, we're using 2011 cost manuals, and the values are going to be changing based on the cost of construction from the Marshall and Swift cost manual. It's a, I don't know, national or international cost system that says if you're going to build a 10 by 20 garage, this is what it's going to cost you. Now, there are some calculations that go into that as well, but nonetheless, this is what you have to look for. This is what the assessor says you have, and this is what you need to look for. Now, one of the things that kicks into here, there are some multipliers. And it's what we found in Peterborough, as I was explaining to this one property owner, there are actually 5 multipliers that the basic cost of construction are applied against. One of the first ones is the construction grade. The cost manual says for an average house, it's going to cost X number of dollars, let's say $1. To build an average house, let's say a ranch-style house, a rectangle, 8-foot ceilings, vinyl floors, carpet, builder-grade cabinets, that's an average house. It's going to cost $1 to build this house. But now, let's see, you have vaulted ceilings, you have some ceramic floors, and based on the definitions that are in one of the appendix items for the assessor's records, it has a description of what all these different cost levels mean. Now my house is a C+1. What does that mean? C+1 actually is, well, let me go back here. The C+1, I'll get to it in a second. The C+1 is a cost multiplier. And just keep that in mind. When we look at some of the items on here, we're looking at the assessment calculations, and on my house, I have 1,784 square feet of finished above-grade living space. And based on an average construction grade, it would cost, let's say, $88,800. I also have a crawl space, and my crawl space is an additional $8,700, and now we're up to $97,500 to build my house. I also have air conditioning. So air conditioning adds $2,800. I have more than 5 plumbing fixtures. Built into the assessment, built into the basic cost is 1 bathroom. Okay? C-grade, basic cost of construction is 1 bathroom. I happen to have more than 1 bathroom. And we don't go by number of bathrooms, we go by plumbing fixtures. Sink, toilet, shower or tub is 3, kitchen sink is 4, and the water heater is 5. Those are my basic fixtures. Well, I now have 3 more than that, so when you subtract 8 from 5, I get assessed an additional $700 per fixture. So my assessment just went up by another $2,100. My jetted tub adds another $800, so my cost of construction is $103,200. And when we add the exterior features of my concrete covered front porch and my deck, that adds another $4,700. And we're at the total of, and then we add the garage of $11,800, we're at $119,700. Okay, that's what it costs my house to build average grade, C grade. Well, my house is C+1. So how does that factor in? How do we account for that? So you look down on the bottom, that's the this is where the replacement cost is. But when we look at the quality factor, C+1 equates to this table. We take the average cost and multiply it by 105% to reflect the higher level of quality. So my $119,000 is, we add another, multiply it times 105%, now my cost of construction was just bumped up 5%. I have seen some houses, I know of, there's one person I think in Porter County that makes a point to say his house should not be graded at a AAA. But the AAA houses are 360% of the cost manual. And usually the AAA houses would be the Dean White level, you know, the millions and millions of dollars level. And when you get into those levels, it costs a lot of money to build those. And that's how these different quality levels are accounted for in the assessment process. So you take the C+1, and down on the right you'll see a 1.05, and that's one of the first multipliers. So I've taken my basic cost of 119.7 and multiply it by 105%. Well then, let me go back, then we have what's called a location multiplier. Because we're in Lake and Porter County, it costs 11% more to build in Lake and Porter County than it does in the cost manual, which was developed for the majority of the rest of the county. So now we take my 105% number and kick it up another 11% on top of that. Okay, so now I'm up, and it's not 105 plus 5% plus 11% makes 16. It's 105, and then take the 105 number and multiply that times 111%. So it's multiplicative, not additive. So that's the second one. The third one is the, let's see, there's the location multiplier, the depreciation. Depreciation is based off of 1999, and so there is a factor in there. The older the house, the more it depreciates. And in my house here, it was built in 2005 or 4. I had a depreciation level built in of 7%. So you take that 105 times the 111 and knock it down 7%. And then we have, there's some abnormal obsolescence that was...
How'd you get that, Joe?
I don't know. That was there when I bought it. You know, I asked our assessor about it, and she says, "No, that's what we have for you. So we're going to keep it there." Okay, this was before. Then there's a neighborhood factor that can be added in there. If you are in a high-level neighborhood, we're going to charge you for, or the assessor is going to charge you for being in a high-quality neighborhood, because the trend lines are, the statistics are showing that this neighborhood sells for higher levels. And then we also have the market adjustment, which over time is what the ratio study is based on. The ratio study is what is used to adjust the values from one year to the other. And if the values have historically gone up, that number over time is going to get bigger, bigger, bigger. And over the course of the last few years, the bigger numbers have gone down because the values have gone down. So it sounds a little complicated, but it really, from the appeal side, is you need to look at the record card to see if there's something that's wrong. And if there's any argument that you can make to change your record card, for instance, if you see something that everything looks fine, but your number still is way high, then it's possible it could be in the grade factor. Because as you could see from those numbers, if you have a nice house, and a nice house doesn't have to be one that's $500,000. It could be a $200,000 house that's got a B+2 grade on it that should have no more than a C+2. And you can see that's a 30% swing in the assessment. And if you can convince the assessor with market information and by photos of the inside of your house that here's my house, I don't have the vaulted ceilings and the 9-foot ceilings and crown molding and finish trim that's this high and real high quality kitchen cabinets. If you take those photos in, you might be able to make an argument to reduce your grade so that it reduces your assessment. Anything you make a change on this record card will stay there for the future. And where people get caught up is they go in and they win their appeal, the assessor makes a market adjustment for the 1 year only, and the next thing you know, bam, you're way up here again. Why did I have to come back a second time when they fixed it last year? Because they didn't fix it. All they did was make a market adjustment based on the data that you brought for that 1 year only. So the key is, this is the inside scoop, is trying to find something with your record card that you can argue to change so that it will carry over year after year. Okay, this on the DLGF website, this is one of the pages. This happens to be, they have the new one out there now, but if you want to see the assessment manual, you can download it all day long. I have it. It's about, let's see, I got 2 binders that are 4-inch binders, hold papers that high, so there's probably 200 pages at least. And it goes from cover page, it's got all the appendixes. Appendix A, it's 11 megabytes in size, so it's pretty big. And it shows all of the quality, class, and grade. It has photos in there. It has a chart that depicts what it means to be a C grade, a C+1, a C+2, all the way up to AAA. Yes?
So, in the last slide, you were saying the nicer your house is from the interior, the higher your grade will be. So
Right.
it's a good idea, like before you remodel your house, take all the pictures before you model gold.
Well, I guess that's an alternative.
Thank you.
That's an alternative. One thing that I could tell you, I know there's some gamesmanship that happens out there. When you go in front of PETA BOA, you will testify under oath. And so, but when you go for an informal hearing, there's no oaths taken at all. So, however you want to argue your point, I leave that up to you to decide. But if you, one of the things that the assessors are very savvy to is when people try to cover up things. For instance, if you have a finished basement, say you get your record card, and let me go back, you get your record card, and like on mine I have a crawl space, but on the record card, here's a basement. And the basement, you've got square footage here, but it says 0. Well, you've got, like in my case, 1,784 square feet. Let's say it was a basement, and I have 0, but I finished it with ceramic floors and really nice drywall and finish trim and all that. And when you know that the assessors come around every 4 years, because they have to do reassessment. And normally, depends on the assessor, I know we notify, like the police department and our people are all in identifying garb and that, so that people, when someone sees someone going in throughout the neighborhood, they know it's the assessor. Fortunately, nobody takes pot shots at our staff, but if you don't do that, then people are wondering, hey, they're starting to call the police and all that kind of thing. But if you have a basement, usually whatever you could see on the outside is fair game. So some of the assessors will look in the basement windows, and if they now see a finished basement where the record card says there wasn't one, guess what's going to happen? You're going to get tagged for a finished basement. Now, if you have the blinds closed and tighter than a drum and they can't see, one way that the assessor can invite you to come talk to them is by assuming that there's a finished basement and give you the opportunity to prove them wrong. That happens. So I'm just letting you know. So be wary of trying to hide things from the assessors, because there are ways that they can find things out. And I don't, it's really, everyone tries to make sure that they're being assessed properly, is the best I could say. Yes?
So they can never come inside your...
Only if you invite them.
I see.
Only if you invite them. Now, I've seen where I was doing an appraisal in St. John, and the assessor in St. John Township, everyone was knocking on the door and said, we're the assessor, we're here to check out your property. And the lady who I went there to meet, she thought they were me. And she says, oh, come on in.
Oh.
They left. I was pulling up when they were leaving. I says, oh, I see the assessor was here. So who are you? I said, I'm the appraiser. You work with them? No. Fortunately, everything was fine, but the assessors will ask to be invited in. You don't have to. I mean, it's your home, but I think the law does say, though, that with regard to going inside properties, I think it's kind of vague where it talks about being able to go in, but you really don't try to push it.
I don't believe that you can, if a homeowner refuses you entering their home, you can't.
Right, you can't.
But you can assess by assumption. You can
Right.
say it's an A grade, the basement's finished, and
Right.
you can max that assessment amount, because then you're going to appeal it, and you're going to want to let them in.
Right.
So it's better to let them see what you've got.
So I've been on properties where I'll have the record card with me. I'll show the homeowner, your house is actually smaller than it really is, but I'll tell you, the assessor doesn't have that bonus room that you finished over the garage. So if you're going to let him in to measure your house, you're going to get, you might end up being assessed higher than what you're going to save. Yes?
Would they have a way of finding out about a building permit?
The building permit is where they usually start. On new construction, that's where the assessor will get a copy of the building permit. And they'll get a copy of the blueprints, and that's how they start. And the one thing that most people don't realize is when you tear things down, like garages and that, the only way the assessor knows is you got to tell them. And a lot of times you're telling them through a demolition permit. And so if you don't get a demolition permit, you at least need to tell the assessor, look, I don't have this garage anymore. Please stop assessing me. Yes?
You got a 3-room house, and all of a sudden they're assessing you for 4 rooms. Where did they pull that out of there?
You don't get assessed for more rooms, you get assessed for more size. More size and more fixtures.
No, I think he's saying somebody made a mistake. He's using a specific.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, our tax bill is showing we have 4 rooms all of a sudden on our house, and we,
4 bedrooms.
4 bedrooms. I mean,
Okay.
excuse me.
Yeah, if the record card still says you have the same size house, doesn't matter how many bedrooms you have, you still get assessed for the size, not for the number of bedrooms.
We'll just leave that one alone.
Yeah, it's, I mean, you could go there and ask them to correct it. Look, I only got 3 bedrooms, I don't know where you're getting 4 from. But they, you know, it's just a way of trying to describe the property. And it's even, I think there's even, it shows it up here somewhere, like number of rooms. Yeah, it's got it under accommodations. Mine has 3 bedrooms, a living room, family. I don't even have a family room. I got what would be considered like an eat-in kitchen. So I don't have a dining room, but they're considering it as a family room. But you don't get assessed on rooms, you get assessed on size.
Hey, Joe,
Yes?
what I would suggest, if you see something like that, that you go and look at your property record card and make sure they didn't actually add square footage somewhere for some reason. I mean, if they made a mistake with the bedrooms, it's also possible they may have made some kind of change to your square footage of your house. So I would suggest you look at your new card or your old card, or go talk to your assessor. Just make sure that that didn't actually occur.
Yeah,
And that your square footage didn't change along with that bedroom number.
And it's a good point, because they may have added a 10 by 10 size to your house, and when they add 10 by 10, well, gosh, what's in there? It must be another bedroom. So, and you can ask them, can we compare last year's record card to this year's record card? They can pull them up, and you can make the comparisons to see if there's been any changes other than for trending. Okay, let's see here. We talked about the grade, the multipliers. This is the one page. I couldn't fit them all, but this shows you how many chapters there are to the assessment guidelines book. Now this is a Form 133, which is the objective appeal form. This is the form that is out there on the DLGF website under the forms. If you go down, you can see they have forms, and you can click on it. You can get this one off the internet. The current tax year that we're dealing with right now, if you're going to appeal your assessment right now, the current tax year is 2011, pay 12, and so we're dealing with 11? We're dealing with March 1st of 2011. I don't know why I have 12 up there.
In Lake County, the filing deadline is for the 11 pay 12
Right.
assessment.
So I'm a little bit of ahead in Porter County, but in Lake County, if you file an appeal on the Form 133 or a Form 130, you would put 2011 up there, because the assessment year right now is March 1st of 2011 for taxes that are paid in 2012. And so this is just saying what the 133 is for: a math error, incorrect size of structures, missing deductions, illegal taxes. This section down below, I just blew it up a little bit. It just shows what happens if I fill out the form wrong. They'll just send it back to you. And it really, this form is somewhat, it's somewhat intimidating. It looks like you got to fill everything out. You don't have to fill any of it out other than your name, the owner, how to get a hold of you, the property number, and the possible results. This is on the form. As a result of filing this petition, the assessment may increase, may decrease, or remain the same. So that's the warning. And it does happen from time to time. Not a lot, but from time to time. And this information here you can get off the record card. And this is the back side. This is the description of the error. Basically, it's just saying what's the assessment on the property now, and if you know what the number you want it to be, should be, you could fill in the chart below it, but you don't have to. For the most part, if you say I don't have a deck and you say I do, we don't expect you to know how much the assessment of a deck is. So you can just leave that blank, and that'll be calculated once those items are changed. And then check the appropriate box. You're requesting this. Now this is the objective. Yes, this is the objective file. There was a mathematical error or omission by a state county officer, was not given credit for an exemption.
Always check there was a mathematical error in the assessment box. Don't ever check any other box. That's all I got to
There you
say.
go. Inside information. Share with your friends over a cocktail. From someone who has the experience. Normally on PETA BOA, we don't see these 133 appeals, because Those are handled during an informal appeal hearing. Usually if you go and ask to see the record card and you see, hey, I don't have this or I don't have that, you know, they won't most likely even fill this out. They'll just work to correct the record card right there for you. And then if you do use this form, it's a matter of describing what you found on the record card that's not right. And then on the bottom, don't forget to sign and date. And I always recommend have 2 copies, one that you can give to the assessor and see them date stamp it, and another one that you keep that you also ask them to date stamp it, because that's your only proof that you filed it when you did. Especially a Form 130 appeal, you have 45-day window, and if you don't file it on time, you're going to lose out. If you filed it on time but don't have proof that you filed it on time, you still might lose out. And so make sure to keep a copy of everything you give the assessor. So on this, again, this is the Form 130 process. This is what happens if you use the subjective appeal process. The value of my property isn't what you say it is. And what it says up here in the beginning, the taxpayer has a right to appeal an assessment based on the Form 11 notice. You must file the appeal within 45 days. So that's the Form 11 I showed you, that in Lake County you probably, I don't think there's been a Form 11 sent out since 2007. So the Form 113 notice is a notice that the assessor would send to you if they have found an error during a process and now they're changing your assessment some other time than the normal time. For instance, you now have put a deck on your property, you've done some improvements to it that they have seen. You could get a Form 113 to now change your assessment, and you have the right to appeal based on that as well. Say you put a deck up and it costs you $1,000, but the assessor says, well, wait, you know, that deck just added $20,000. So hold on here. I'm going to call John Crum because he's my buddy over here. He's going to get me an appraisal, and he'll prove that the deck didn't add $20,000. Might have added 2 or 3, or maybe not 20. So you have the Form 11 notice, the Form 113, the tax bill. The tax bill, that's another notice that's required but not issued. Let's see, if the notice required but not issued must file the appeal within 45 days. So if you don't get the Form 11 and you haven't gotten a Form 113, the tax bill is the next item that you will have the right to appeal with. And then the last one, I don't think I've ever seen this, says May 10th filing.
That's old. That used to be used a lot. I've been at this for 20 years, and we knew that every year if we wanted to appeal an assessment for somebody in a subjective nature, we had a May 10th filing deadline.
Okay.
So, but that's pretty much extinct.
Yeah, so it goes with the tax bills. Even like now, we've got the May 10th is come and gone, but you still have the ability to be able to file an appeal till July the 9th. July 9th, correct?
Right.
Okay. So the notice period is when you have that 45-day window. The next step is when you file an appeal, it initiates a review. Basically, it gives you the opportunity to meet informally either with the township assessor if you have one, or with the county assessor. If you can resolve the issue with the county assessor or the township assessor during the informal hearing, a Form 134, is that the right form? 134, yeah, the Form 134 will then be sent to you as an agreement, basically. You say, okay, my house is worth 100. The assessor says, yeah, you're right, it's worth 100. Based on the comparable data you brought to us, we'll change your assessment. You then have the right to an agreement, a signed agreement. The assessor will sign off on it. They'll either give you the 134 that day, or it'll get mailed to you in the mail after maybe they do some research. And once you sign off on it, it's over. It goes to the auditor. The auditor sends you another form for a refund, and then you sign that, and then the money comes to your pocket, or it can be applied for the next tax bill. So that's the informal hearing. Now, if you cannot agree at the informal hearing, then the next level of appeal is PETA-BOA. It's the Property Tax Assessment Board of Appeals. Lake County has a 5-member board. Porter County, we have 3. If the, let me see here, if the 134, if the 134 is signed off, it's over. If no agreement is reached, this is where the deadlines have been horrendously missed. It says if no agreement is reached or PETA BOA does not receive Form 134 within 120 days of your appeal. So if you appeal, you have the right to have your appeal heard within 120 days. Now, as it's been said, we had appeals going back to 2007 that had never been heard. So this was horrendously missed. PETA BOA, if you haven't had your appeal heard in 120 days, PETA BOA must hold a hearing within 180 days of filing the appeal. So you've got 120 days and 180 days, so what is that, 200 and 300 days. So the most it should ever take is almost a year to get your appeal heard. Some appeals haven't been heard in years. So if you don't have your appeal heard at PETA BOA, you can bypass that and go to the next level, which is the Indiana Board of Tax Review. The Indiana Board of Tax Review is a board that is more of a judicial board. There is a judge that hears the appeals. It's a formal process, and usually if you go to the Indiana Board of Tax Review, you need to be represented well, whether it be by you, by an experienced tax representative, or an attorney, because they follow the rules of court in many cases, or most all the cases basically. So you have to have, they have deadlines that you have to meet, and it's a very formal type of hearing. Usually cases that go to the Indiana Board of Tax Review are high dollar cases because now people are hiring attorneys to represent them, and they're in some cases talking millions of dollars. Someone that's appealing for $1,000 off their assessment usually doesn't go that far. People usually say, I'm not even going to mess with that. But the Indiana Board of Tax Review is the next level. If you don't like what the Indiana Board of Tax Review says, you have the next level, which is the tax court. And that's the next level, and that is a court. It's going to be heard by the tax court judge. And if you don't like the tax court opinion, then you can go to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court doesn't have to hear your case. They hear those cases that they want to hear. So there are a number of levels of appeals. PETA BOA is the most local level, and if you can get everything resolved at PETA BOA, and hopefully you can get your record card adjusted, then things will carry forward in the future. This is the Form 130. Again, this is tax year 2011 for Lake County. Usually it's the real property is the checkbox that you want to check. The petitioner information is on the bottom. This is on the back side. This information is not required at the time of filing the appeal. There's a box up there that says this is how your house is currently assessed. This is what you think it should be assessed. You don't have to fill it out. If you have an appraisal, that can give you an indication of what it should be. I wouldn't worry about the land, trying to break it out, land and improvements. It's just the total that you're really worried about. And then explain your evidence. Whatever type of evidence the parties offer, they must explain its significance. No weight will be given to conclusionary statements. My taxes are too high. Can't do anything about it. My assessment's too high. The only thing I can say is you got to prove it. And when in Porter County, when we have people who are regular homeowners that come in front of us and they have some comparable data, and the comparable data, the best indicator of value is the fact that you bought your house from an arm's length transaction, meaning you weren't related to the person you were buying it from, or had a business relationship, that type of thing, that it was exposed to the open market where anybody could have bought it, and it was exposed to the open market for a reasonable period of time, and neither you nor the seller were atypically motivated, meaning you didn't have to buy it and the seller didn't have to sell it. And that's where a lot of the problems come in refinancing, because there are appraisers out there who will just grab any property out there, us excluded. There are people out there that will grab something that says, God, this is right next door, this is the best deal, but this house over here, this house that I'm appraising, I really think it should be $100,000, but this one next door sold for $50,000. Well, when you start digging into it, you find out that it was a bank foreclosure, the bank dumped it on the market, and they were just trying to get out of it what they could. That is not a market-based sale. That is a liquidated sale. And that is not, any appraiser in their right mind would not use that sale unless that was the market. If all you had was foreclosures, that's the market. And unfortunately, some of the urban areas that we have in Gary, East Chicago, some of those areas, Hammond, I know a Hessville area for a while there, all you had was foreclosures. And they were nice properties. They were redone and very nice. That was the market, and that was where the values were. But things change over time. So what we're looking for is, if you bought your property, now we're dealing right now in Lake County, March 1st of 2011 is the valuation date. All right? So this is now what, June the 17th. We're looking at what was your house worth on March 1st of 2011, a year and a quarter ago. Now, the data that we used to determine the value on March 1st of 2011 was from all of 2010 and the first 2 months of 2011. So if you're going to file an appeal now, you have to know that you have to look back March 1st, 2011 and look at data from the 14 months before that. Now, if you bought your house in that 14 months and it was on the market, you bought it through a realtor, let's say, or it could have been a private sale, but they marketed it and you can show that it was, all you got to do is, here's the closing statement. Here's showing how many days it was on the market. There was nothing, I was not related to these people. The assessor should, you don't have to, but should look at that data and say, that's market evidence, I can hang my hat on it, we'll change your assessment. Yes?
Can the taxes be adjusted just for like 1 year? I bought a house and it had a fire.
Okay, yes.
So I bought it for $40,000, now it's assessed for $136,000. I just paid taxes on the $136,000. Now it really is worth that much right now, but
yes, you can.
May
What you have
1st, or whatever,
March 1st of 2011.
it was only worth $40,000.
Right. So what you have to do is if all you bring in is a closing statement and they see 136 and they see 40, something's goofy here. And if you have evidence that this property was in a fire, that it was this,
on the MLS,
that.
there's all kinds of
Okay.
fire pictures.
All right.
So bring that all in?
Absolutely. What you have to do is you have to prove the condition of the property for that time frame. Now, the next year after it's rebuilt, now it's going to be back up to where it would be. But if you remember in Highland and in Munster in 2006, 2008, even in Hobart Lake Station, all the houses were inundated, from the floodwaters. There is a form that can be filled out for natural disaster damage to have your house reassessed for that 1 year. And I don't know if that form might be the same one that can be used for that, but it's a matter of doing just that. Going to the assessor, having your evidence and say, look, this is what it was, the condition of it. It was on the open market, I bought it through the MLS, it was exposed so many days, and this is what a typical buyer would pay for it. Yes, sir?
I'm not finding that at all at the informal hearing level. Those are wasted time.
But where do you find it a waste of time?
Lake County and Porter County.
Where in Porter County?
When I switch all my home, if I buy a home in a $130,000 neighborhood, it's a terrible,
Yeah?
and they don't care.
All right,
You
when?
can bring in pictures, you can bring in your repairs, they don't care. They say, well, your neighbor to the right's worth 130, the neighbor to the left's 130, you're worth 130. That's it.
Well, when was the last time that you were in front of a Porter County informal hearing officer?
I haven't gone for 2 years because it's been a waste of my time. I put a seat of bowl on.
Okay, so let me tell you this.
If I don't bring in an appraisal, I'm wasting my time.
Okay, let me tell you this. January 1st of 2011, last January, we have John Snyder as the new assessor. John Scott was the previous assessor, and he had his staff that was doing the informal hearings. John Snyder is the new assessor. Peter Boa, I was appointed to Peter Boa with 2 new people that none of us were on Peter Boa before January 1st of 2011. So if you went more than a year and 4 months ago, then...
I've had phone calls with them, and it's the same thing. If they set up the thing, you give your information, and it's the same thing. Well, let me look up your information. Everybody in your neighborhood's 130. I don't care where you bought yours from, what kind of pictures you bring in. They
Well,
pretty much tell you that, so.
I certainly, and I know John would certainly like to know what evidence that you might have as to who you might have talked to or when it was, because that's not the attitude that he's telling his staff to display.
I'll live in the township, that's what you get.
Well, we only have one township, Portage Township.
Getting called, that's what I get. And it's worse in Lake County.
In Lake County, I can't speak for Lake County. I can speak, Daniel Tim is the chief deputy for John Snyder. So I don't know, Daniel, if you have any comments. He's saying that when he calls, he's getting the runaround, that he's not getting the time of day with respect to having his, he's finding properties that are in disrepair, and people are just saying, hey, your neighbors are worth this, worth that. I don't know, do you have any comment?
Do you know who you're dealing with?
He's all the way in the back.
Fire's been raised every year. Used to be, you could do what you said, and that was a fair thing. But now it's getting to the point that if you don't come to an appraisal, you're wasting your time.
Well, I can tell you at Peterborough, that's not true. Because I've been there for a year, and January 1st of 11, and it's clear in the law as well. And we follow, you know, I've sat on both sides of this table, and the one attitude that I display is, I don't want to treat anybody any differently than I want to be treated back. And the only people that I take no pity on are attorneys that are not prepared, tax representatives that are not prepared, and appraisers that are not prepared. Because these are professionals that should know what they're doing, and if they don't bring a USPAP compliant appraisal, they just try to do these conclusionary statements of, well, you know, this house is really kind of run down, and you know, we really expect that it's worth only this. What's your evidence? If you don't bring any evidence, you know, especially if you have a professional there, they know better. Now, for the general homeowner, I try to give them some education at the same time. This is what we're looking for. What do you have? How does it relate to your property? We try to make sure that we have an open mind to work with people. I'm telling you, that's the attitude that I display. Now, I don't believe you've ever been in front of my board.
We'll be seeing each other soon.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah, what
You find out when he gets there.
Well, that's fine. Well, you know, hopefully, you won't have to come to Peterborough because you'll be able to resolve your issue at the informal hearing. Have you had informal hearings yet on whatever you're referring to?
No.
Okay.
Not of this.
Okay.
Area. But yeah, I think this one it's from several years back.
Okay, because right now we're cleaning up. We just had a meeting last Monday. The Monday before that, we had 65 appeals in front of us. Majority of them were still from '09. We're getting those cleaned up. The goal is to have all of these appeals cleaned up by the end of the year, because the impact on local government is significant when they have to take the money out of their current budgets that are trying to spend for police and fire because of appeals that have been now set. But I can tell you that the attitude that John Snyder has displayed, and if you want to write Daniel Tim's name down, it's T-I-M-M. If you have a problem, you know, or Pat Howell, we're serious. Well, here.
Yeah, just call the office and ask for us.
We'll give you Daniel's card.
Yeah.
And when did I tell you to put your secrets? How many times have I told you that? How many times? Bruce thinks he knows it all. Why didn't you call me and ask? That guy's gonna drive this whole conversation down.
Hey, folks, we need to get back on track there.
Okay.
Dave, I'm sure he'll hopefully take care of you. Definitely.
When you have your first issue with Porter County, call Daniel Tim, and he will work with you on whatever issue you have. Because the goal is we want to get it right. We don't want to play this game of having people try to show us market information that people are ignoring when we should be looking at it. Because you're right, the Indiana Board of Tax Review, I can tell you from experience that if you have an appraisal the Indiana Board of Tax Review will take an appraisal. They will look at that over any argument that the assessor makes. That has been proven time and time again at the Indiana Board of Tax Review. You don't have to have an appraisal. Now, it comes down to the experience and the attitude at the different hearing officers and PETA BOA. But I can tell you at PETA BOA, in our case, we don't look for appraisals. If there are appraisals, it's great. I mean, it's a great piece of evidence. But we're looking for comparable data, and sometimes it's difficult to come by. But we're trying to work with people to come up with a conclusion that we can hang our hat on. But anyway, getting back to this, no weight will be given to conclusionary statements. The parties must always explain how their evidence relates to the appealed property's market value and use as of the relevant valuation date. And March 1st of 2011 is the current valuation date. And don't forget the sign and date. And what is market evidence? In Indiana, assessing officials determine the assessed value for property by analyzing sales in its neighborhood. And if you remember, I had that neighborhood on the front of that record card. My house is compared with other properties in Portage that are on large parcels. Sales in its neighborhood over a period of time, then applying a percentage change in value to the prior year assessment. An assessment determined using this mass appraisal method is presumed to be accurate. Now, statistically, these numbers go through a lot of gyrations, and there are statistics that if the neighborhood falls within these statistical measurements, it's presumed to be accurate. Now, the one thing that I can tell you, the state law has changed, where if the assessment that was fixed from the prior year, or the assessment from the prior year has gone up more than 5% in the current year, the assessor is required to prove their number right. If the assessment did not go up, if the assessment went up by 5% or less, the number is presumed to be accurate, and the burden of proof is on the petitioner. So there is a little bit of leeway in there when it comes to a big assessment change. The assessor's got to prove their number right. A taxpayer may rebut the presumption and establish a different value by offering evidence that's consistent with market value in use. Market value in use basically on residential properties is, it's a residential property, it's being used as a residential property, what's its market value? In some cases, when you're dealing with an appraisal, you got to be careful of the word market value, because market value in a regular appraisal takes into account what is its highest and best use, when for taxing purposes, the highest and best use might be a residential subdivision, but its current use is a landscaping business. So it's being valued as a landscaping business, not as a residential subdivision. So the market value and use of a property for its current use as reflected by utility received by an owner or similar user from the property. What would a buyer pay for your house, basically, or your rental property? It's based on market evidence, market rents. The value of the property would sell for, assuming its current use through an open market sale. Now, if you look at, again, going back to the DLGF website, you'll find this on there. It says, even though the law says an appraisal is not required, the tax court has ruled that the most effective method to rebut the presumption that the assessment is correct is through a presentation of a market value and use appraisal completed in performance with use package. Basically, it's an appraisal that is being done. It could be from a broker, a real estate broker, who signs as an appraiser, who certifies they have no interest in the property. It's an